Okay, onward. We're going to share the screen. Okay. Here we go. We're in the section of Jewish meditation, one of the chief books we're using. We're in the section on the rules of the Amidah. We've already established, per Rabbi Kaplan's research, that the Anshe Knesset Hagdalah, the men of the Great Assembly, established the Amidah, the standing prayer, as a national meditation. They had made a decision to disallow the teaching of meditation as of that point. That was at the time of the destruction of the Second Temple. When we were dispersed, they were very concerned that Jews would come up with a fake spirituality. They'd get a taste of what meditation can do. They'd get a taste of Nevuah, but they wouldn't have the background needed. They wouldn't have the environment needed to really keep their heads on straight and feet on the ground. So Chazal at that point said, can't teach it anymore. But what we will do is we will have a national prayer, which could serve as a meditation. Big deal. And as we've gone through this, we've seen just how spiritually enlightened these people were, and that kind of consciousness that they invested in those to feel out those prayers. It's almost magical. Okay, so we're at a point now where we've been reviewing what he considers the rules of the Amidah, and we'll see how they're spiritually oriented, and the rules themselves, the way we're supposed to be davening the Amidah, is itself a meditation. Okay, what does he say about standing? It is called the Amidah, which means standing. So what is it about standing? Why are we standing? Okay, this is what he says. By definition, the Amidah is said while standing. The feet should be together, which, as the Talmud states, is the stance of the angels. The head can be slightly bowed and the hands be placed over the heart. Okay. He makes a point that the reason why we're standing is because we're supposed to be like the angels. Why? What is it about angels? And why do we have to imitate them when we pray? Okay. First, we're going to take a step to the side and see what yeshiva.com has to say about standing. This is what they say. You're summoning, when you stand, you summon your complete being from head to toe in prayer. And they say that this position is one through which you can express fear and awe. And they're advising against leaning against anything. Like some people will lean on the stenda, advising against that, because in their opinion, that's taking away from a position through which you demonstrate fear and awe of the Almighty. Okay, you are standing before the King. Okay, the King of the universe. Okay, so they're taking the fear and awe angle, and they're saying that the upright standing posture helps you promote that attitude. Okay. They then move on and say one must put his legs together so that they look like one. The reason for this is that the separation of one's legs exposes the material side of a person and represents the pursuit of worldly matters. Thus, we keep our feet together in prayer, just like the Kohanim, who, in their ascent to the altar, would walk heel to toe to avoid spreading their legs. It's actually mentioned. Okay, so their second reason for why we're standing is that standing allows us to put our legs together and keep our mind on our bodies from the belly up, not the belly down. Okay, as did the Kohanim when they were ascending the altar, nobody could look up. Okay. Third, they're mentioning Ezekiel, where Rabbi Kaplan actually got this idea about the legs and the angels. Their legs are a straight leg. Chazal, this is from Ezekiel. Chazal learned this from the angels, of which it is said, their legs are a straight leg, meaning their legs were placed together so they appear to be one leg. That's actually the text of that book. Okay. He's mentioning, so yeshiva.com is talking about expressing fear. It's talking about having a spiritual mindset and not a physical material mindset. And they're mentioning, as did Rabbi Kaplan, imitating the angels. So why should we imitate the angels? Okay. Rabbi Kaplan kind of talks about that in another book, which I will get to you, Sefer Yetzirah, which is certainly esoteric and right up there. So I'm certainly not equipped to go into it in depth, but I will tell you what it says here about the angels. Okay. This is what he says. In a sense, the mind is a pure spiritual entity bound to man's physical brain. Many thoughts and memories may be bound together by man's physical brain, but the mind can only focus on one of them at a time. In simple terms, a person can only think of one thing at a time. A thought is a spiritual entity, and as such can only contain a single concept. Since both a thought and an angel are basic spiritual entities, this is very closely related to the fact that an angel can only have a single mission. Okay. Okay. So Rabbi Kaplan, in his translation of Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Creation, is making a connection between how our minds work and how angels work. He's making the point that angels only have a single mission. We've heard this before. And so they have a single-mindedness in what they do. They don't multitask. They don't have multiple missions. They have a single mission. And so Rabbi Kaplan is saying, similarly, the way we're built from a spiritual point of view is that we can only think of one thing at a time. Okay. Now, somebody might say, oh, yeah, well, my mind floods with thoughts. Well, that's a problem. That is, Rabbi Kaplan, I think, would say that if you were to upgrade your skills spiritually in terms of the functioning of your mind, that wouldn't be taking place. You'd be looking at your thoughts one at a time. Okay. So this is an indirect way that I think Rabbi Kaplan is stressing kavanah, concentration. And you could say, therefore, that the reason why we're imitating angels is that they have single-mindedness in the way they go about things, and so should we. So this is a stress on having concentration and focus when you pray. That's why you want to be like an angel, because that's what they have. And they are spiritual beings. And if we want to be more like spiritual beings, then we have to do like them. That's the connection I see between being like an angel and davening. That's why we want to imitate them. Is that what Yechezkel meant in that text? I don't know, because as you can imagine, it's a very highfalutin text. Maybe at some point we'll have the background and the understanding to dive into it. But for now, I think it's safe enough for us to understand that point. That's why we want to be like angels, a single-minded kavanah. And by the way, we are going to be discussing kavanah at a later point more in depth. Okay. Let's still talk about standing, and remember that the Anshe Knesset Hagdalah established the Amidah as a meditation. So our next question is, does standing have anything to do with meditation? Okay. Interestingly, if you look at Wikipedia, which happens to be a pretty good resource for a bunch of Jewish teachings, this is what they say. The name about Amidah, if you looked up Amidah in Wikipedia, you'd see this is what they say. The name Amidah, which literally is the Hebrew gerund for standing, comes from the fact that the worshiper recites the prayer while standing with feet firmly together. This is done to imitate the angels, as we just said. Okay. As worshipers address the divine presence, they must remove all material thoughts from their mind, just as angels are purely spiritual beings. In a similar vein, this is quoted in Wikipedia, the Tiferet Yisrael explains in his commentary, Boaz, that the Amidah is so called because it helps a person focus his or her thoughts. So in Wikipedia, we have a source called Tiferet Israel, which we'll get into a second. And that commentary, the part of the commentary called Boaz, says that the Amidah is called the standing prayer, the Amidah, because it helps a person do what? Focus his or her thoughts. So now from this source, we're back at looking at the importance of focusing. Okay, so what is the Tiferet Israel? Okay. Yisrael Lifshitz, a 19th century Ashkenaz rabbi who wrote a commentary called Tiferet Yisrael. That's the Tiferet Yisrael is not the name of somebody, it's the name of what he wrote. Okay. Commentary on the Mishnah. Okay. And that commentary has two parts, Yachin and Boaz, okay. Corresponding to two pillars in Solomon's temple, okay. So here we have a spiritually gifted scholar writing a commentary on the Mishnah and basically saying in this commentary on the that the Amidah is supposed to be said standing. It's a standing prayer because standing helps you focus. Another source talking about the importance of focusing and standing. Okay. Okay. Do we have another source that can enlighten us more about how standing helps you become spiritually attuned? Interestingly, we have the viewpoint of a Buddhist master of Korea. These guys are professional meditators. They meditate when they're 3 and they keep on going till they die, and they become masters of meditation. So this is what this Buddhist master of Korea says. As you practice standing meditation, you develop a greater kinesthetic awareness of your body, a clear sense of your orientation in space and among people. You take a step away from the habit of always passively staring at whatever's going on in your head, and you begin to notice the sensations of living more. Colors, sounds, textures, and odors assume greater depth and immediacy. Physical stimuli and emotions feel somehow fresher, more real, even as you notice how fleeting and evanescent the so-called real world is. And this is just the beginning. Each person takes his or her own path through meditation and gains unique insights, which nonetheless can be shared with the world. Okay, mastering the standing posture is the first step in being able to incorporate meditation to our daily lives. How interesting. Okay, so this is a meditation master who's an expert in all forms of meditation, moving meditation, sitting meditation, standing meditation. And here he's talking about in particular, standing meditation. And he's actually describing standing meditation as having a neurological benefit. It makes you more, makes you more attuned to the world. Okay, interesting, because that is exactly how you want to be. If you're praying and you're standing in front of Hakadosh Baruch Hu, God, you want to be attuned. You want to have your eyes and ears open. You want to be receptive. You want to be received and you want to receive. Okay, so here's a meditation master basically saying, yes, you know what? You can do that with standing meditation. All right, so this kind of complements the previous viewpoint about standing enabling you to increase your focus. Here we have a viewpoint that says, yes, and in addition, it makes you more neurologically attuned. So there are people, and actually I've done a standing meditation, and you stand and you're meditating. Okay, So perhaps the Anshe Knesset Hagdalah, the designers of the Amidah, knew this because they were very spiritually attuned, and they knew that if they required us to stand when we prayed the Amidah, it would have a meditative effect. The standing is itself a meditation inside a prayer, which is a meditation. And yet, a box within a box within a box, all leading to an enriched spiritual experience. Okay, so there's a set of ideas to give a little bit more insight into why the Amidah is said standing. Now, we probably won't be able to get into it this week, but maybe next week or the week after, we're going to talk about this more in depth, and we're going to talk about why standing still is required, as opposed to shuckling, as opposed to moving. People daven, they go like this, they go like this. The word standing in the Amidah, we'll see, implies standing still. Okay, so look forward to that. Okay, what does Rabbi Kaplan say next after standing as far as the rules? This is what he says. Okay. Whenever possible, one should face Jerusalem when reciting the Amidah. If one is in Jerusalem, one should face the site of the temple. The physical location of the temple is a source of spiritual energy, and facing in this direction helps draw this energy from the site of the Holy of Holies. According to ancient tradition, this was the place that Jacob called the gate of heaven. And he references Bereshit 28:17. It says that, and as such is the primary source of spiritual energy. He's saying that in of all the places on the earth, there's a certain qualitative difference in terms of the energy, the spiritual energy that's available in these places. And he says that the site of where the temple is, the inside of the temple, the Holy of Holies, is a place of great spiritual energy. And if we face that direction, we're drawing on that energy. I can't explain how that would happen if we're standing in Fair Lawn, New Jersey, but that's the nature of the spiritual universe. It works differently. Okay. All right, so let's elaborate a little bit more about why we're facing Jerusalem and why Jerusalem has a spiritual quality that we should be able to draw off of when we're saying the Amidah. To do that, we'll look at another book he has, this anthology, Jerusalem, Eye of the Universe. Okay. Okay. The fact that prayer should be directed toward Jerusalem was indicated by King Solomon when he built the temple. Upon dedicating the temple, he prayed, "May you," meaning God, "hearken to the prayer of your servant," meaning us, "and of your people Israel, when they pray toward this place." So that's a standard position taken when you find something in text like this, when you have a pasuk, when you have a verse to hang your hat on, it adds a certain legitimacy to the practice. Okay, so according to Rabbi Kaplan's research, it was King Solomon, as described in the first book of Kings, who basically said, we're going to start facing Jerusalem in our prayers. Over and over in his dedication prayer, Rabbi Kaplan says, King Solomon stressed that prayers should be directed toward Jerusalem so that they would be accepted by God. Later, when the Jews were exiled in Babylon, we find that Daniel faced Jerusalem in his 3 daily prayers. That's in the book of Daniel. That's in the episode before Daniel in the lion's den. That's a real complicated situation. But Daniel is held as a model of how we conduct ourselves spiritually in the diaspora when we're out of Israel. So there's a certain significance that that's what Daniel did. Okay. Now, why did Daniel do this, and why do we do this? One reason for this is that Jacob called Jerusalem the gate of heaven, which he mentioned. On a simple level, this means that it is the gate through which prayer ascends on high. So in this understanding, and this spiritual understanding as conveyed by Rabbi Kaplan, there's an architecture, and there's a network through which our prayers go, and Jerusalem is like that depot in Hoboken, where all the buses and trains meet on a large spiritual scale. Okay. In a deeper sense, this also means that it is a gate through which one enters heaven by means of a mystical or prophetic experience. Okay. That's different than prayer. So he's also saying not only is Jerusalem a funnel through which we communicate with God spiritually, but those people that attain prophecy or some kind of mystical experience use the same funnel to do their work. Okay. Okay. He goes on to say, Jerusalem was only generally a focus of prayer. More specifically, it was the Holy Temple and the place of the Ark in the Holy of Holies. A person standing in Jerusalem would face the temple grounds no matter where he was located. An individual praying in the temple itself would face the Holy of Holies, while a person actually praying in the Holy of Holies would face the Ark of the Covenant, directing himself to the point between the Cherubim, which we're going to get into, the Cherubs. Those are key. Okay, so just to talk about the temple for a quick second. Let's see if this works here. That's the temple. Somebody give me a thumbs up if you could see this. Carmine, can you see this? All right, you can't see it?
No, we don't see that, Steve.
Okay, all right, hold on. I know what I have to do, so hold on a quick second. Uh-oh. Okay. So now, let's try this. Can you see this? All right, good. Okay, I figured that out. Thank you. This is the Holy Temple from the Chabad website. And I think where we're talking about is right here. I think that this is the Holy of Holies right here. And only one person at one time a year goes out, that's Kohen Gadol, and he does his Yom Kippur Avodah. But this is that portal. You see all these TV shows and movies about there being a portal. In our spiritual understanding, there it is. That's the portal. And this is the temple here. So it's not that big, close to the size of a football field. And it was first built 833 before the Common Era. The Nebuchadnezzar destroyed it 400 years later. Then it was completed again, 349 before the Common Era. And about 400 years later, the Romans come and there it goes. Okay, so as it becomes important, we can learn more about this. But that's what we're talking about, and that's what we're facing. Okay. So let's get back to this. Can you see this again? Thumbs up, we can see the text?
Yes, yes.
All right, good, thank you. Okay, Rabbi Kaplan continues. Okay, having established that the temple in the Jerusalem is our focal point in prayer. You're not physically facing the Western Wall, but it's your focal point. He says, here we begin to see a close parallel between prayer and prophecy. Just as the space between the cherubim, which we'll get into it, those images, the space between the cherubim was the focus from which prophecy emanated, so too it was the focus to which prayer was directed. To some degree, this can be understood in light of what Rabbi Jacob Ben Asher writes in his Torah. The prayer itself is meant to be a highly mystical experience where one can attain a level close to that of prophecy. So he's talking about us. He's talking about the Amidah, and he's saying that this is a way of becoming close to Nevuah, if you have your spiritual act together. When a person stands in prayer, his mind descends to the spiritual realm, and he can completely divorce himself from the physical. According to Rabbeinu Yonah, this is the meaning of the teaching in prayer. One's eye should be cast downward while his heart is directed on high. Okay. Okay. What are these cherubim? Okay. Let's start out with my Jewish learning. Another pretty decent website is what it says. In the Bible, God sets the cherubim at the entrance of the Garden of Eden after the expulsion of Adam and Eve to guard the way to the tree of life. Two cherubim overlaid with gold with outstretched wings were placed facing one another on the cover of the Ark of the Tabernacle, and figures of cherubim were embroidered on the veil and the curtains of the tabernacle. In Solomon's temple, the two gilded cherubim were not attached to the ark, but were placed as figures 10 cubits high in front of the ark. Okay. So there are these characters, cherubim, that are prominent in places and times of great spirituality. One was at the Garden of Eden, where Adam and Eve were expelled. And these cherubim were intended to guard the tree of life. Now I'm going to give you a side point, which is kind of interesting. There is an ancient biblical martial art called the beer, Aleph Beit Yud Resh, a beer. And it's allegedly the oldest martial art, and it's allegedly the combat art that was used by Abraham and all the people in the Bible. The question is, when you read about all these battles and all these wars, how are they fighting? And an answer is that they were using a beer. Now, a beer is, as you can see, millennia old, but there is an alufa beer. There is an actual carrier of the torch in Israel today. And my son Gil, who lives in Israel, actually met him. And he actually gave me a t-shirt. Give this to your father. He gave me a t-shirt, which is pretty interesting. And the alufa beer says that this passage in Breshit in the Torah that talks about the cherubim being positioned at the entrance to the Garden of Eden to guard the way to the tree of life is a reference to martial arts, the purpose of martial arts as guardians and protectors of life. So there's a symbolic mention here. And you notice they had swords. It doesn't say it here, but the text talks about them having flaming swords, which would be a reference to combat, but their goal is not aggression. Their goal is protection of life. Okay, we'll get into this one of these days. We'll talk about how martial arts should be a form of meditation, and we'll see if we can talk a little bit more about a beer there. Okay, but getting back to prayer, how were these cherubim and how are the cherubim used in meditative prayer? Okay. This is what he says. And stay right there. I'm going to get the book. All right, sorry about that. Okay, this is what he says on the cherubim. In this book, the Meditation on the Bible, this is the first one, the first book he wrote. It talks about Jewish meditation. It's a mind blower. Okay, this is what he says. In the time of the prophets, the focal point of all prayer was the great temple that stood in Jerusalem. The innermost chamber of the temple was the Holy of Holies. So great was the sanctity of this chamber that no person was ever allowed to enter it other than the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, and Yom Kippur. This was part of a most impressive service, and people from all over the world would gather to see the high priest emerge in peace excuse me, after having worshipped in this inner sanctuary. In the center of the Holy of Holies stood the Ark of the Covenant, which was made of wood covered with gold. On this ark was a cover of pure gold, and attached to this cover were two golden cherubs, or cherubim. The entire structure of the ark, its cover, and the cherubim are described in detail in the Bible, and they were made under the personal supervision of Moshe. But even more important was what the ark contained. In it were the two most sacred objects mentioned in the Bible. First, it contained the two tablets inscribed with the 10 Commandments, which God had given to Moses. Besides this, it also contained the original scroll of the Torah, which Moses himself had written as dictated by God. Excuse me. Okay. When King Solomon built the temple, he constructed a deep labyrinth going under the Temple Mount where the holy vessels could be hidden in time of danger. Foreseeing that Jerusalem would be threatened, King Josiah ordered that the ark be concealed in this labyrinth, sealing it off, and okay. The source of all prophetic inspiration was the temple in Jerusalem, particularly the two cherubim on the Ark of the Covenant, which stood in the Holy of Holies. In describing the Ark, God told Moses, I will commune with you and I will speak with you from above the Ark cover, from between the two cherubim which are on the Ark of Testimony. That's from Shemot. What was true of Moses was also true of other prophets, and the primary influence of prophecy came through these two cherubim in the Holy of Holies. There is some evidence that the prophetic experience in some cases came about through intense meditation on these two cherubim. So he's saying that these cherubim that were formed on this gold, and the gold of this ark cover, were focal points of meditation, and that prophecy was what came through, was a byproduct of the intense meditation on the space between the cherubim. Why? And why were the Nevi'im meditating on that? Because as God said, that's my focal point, says God, is that same space between the cherubim. So we have Jerusalem being this portal. We have the temple being a portal within a portal. We have the Holy of Holies being a portal within a portal within a portal. And we have the cherubim being another portal within all this as a communication device with God. Each of the cherubim had the form of a very young child with wings. Even though God had in general forbidden the construction of such images, it was God himself who had commanded that these two forms be placed over the ark. Rather than facing the people, the cherubim faced each other, clearly indicating that they were not meant to be worshipped, but rather that they designated a place where spiritual force was concentrated. The fact that the cherubim stood on the ark containing the tablets in the original Torah scroll indicated that they were the source of the spiritual power. So we have these cherubim facing each other, and his point is, God told us to do this. I mean, we don't pray to images, and, you know, okay, so to deter us from looking at the image and idolizing it, he's saying that God deliberately told us to place these figures looking at each other so that we wouldn't form that connection with each one. In general, the fact that the cherubim had the form of winged human beings indicated that man has the ability to transcend his earthly bonds. So there's symbolism, there's spiritual symbolism in the design of the cherubim. Although man is bound to the earth by his mortal body, he can fly on the wings of his soul, soaring through the highest spiritual universe. This concept was embodied in the very shape of the cherubim, and by meditating on them, a person could indeed fly with his own spiritual wings. So obviously somebody would have to have the background and training to understand the symbolism, but given that kind of orientation, somebody meditating on the cherubim could imagine, could with his mind achieve loftier spiritual heights. Okay. In order to explore this on a deeper level, we must look at the other important places where the cherubim are mentioned in the Bible. The first such place is after Adam and Eve were expelled from the Garden of Eden, where the Torah states, God expelled the man and he placed the cherubim to the east of the Garden of Eden to guard the way of the tree of life. That's from Breshit. Here, tree of life refers to the most profound spiritual experience, and therefore, before one can enter into this, he must first encounter the cherubim. These cherubim are a type of angel. Okay. Okay. So put that aside for a quick second. The second place where we find the cherubim is in Ezekiel's vision, which according to the commentaries is a paradigm of the prophetic experience in general. We mentioned that a few classes ago, that we have a lot of the Nevi'im coming up with these visions and prophecies, but there seems to be a hierarchy in terms of their spiritual symbolism, and Ezekiel's Chariot Prophecy is the gold standard. That seems to have the most spiritual symbolism. And lo and behold, they have cherubim. He says the first thing that Ezekiel saw, he calls chayot, chariots, but these are later identified as the cherubim. The prophet reaches the highest levels of the mystical experience, actually transcending the bonds that tie his mind and soul to the physical world. In accomplishing this, he is actually approaching the tree of life. And the first thing that he encounters are its guardians, which are the cherubim. So in this understanding of the vision of Ezekiel, Ezekiel is attaining this spiritual level that allows him to experience in some way the Garden of Eden as this high spiritual place. Obviously, this is happening in a spiritual realm, but it's a testimony to the level that Ezekiel had accomplished. Okay. The cherubim on the ark were meant to be a counterpart of the cherubim on high, and thus, in a sense, the space between these two forms was seen as an opening into the spiritual dimension. And concentrating his thoughts between the cherubim on the ark, the prophet was also able to pass between the angelic cherubim and then ascend on the path of the tree of life. All right, so this is a whole geography, spiritual geography of somebody who through meditation, our prophets through meditation, that's what they were experiencing. Conversely, when God's message was sent to the prophet, it would also follow the same path, first passing through the spiritual cherubim and then through the ones on the ark. The space between the cherubim was therefore the source of all prophetic inspiration. So that's that portal idea, that the prophet and God are communicating through this network. And on this side, we have the physical dimension, which has these figures in gold on the ark, and through the meditation that the prophet does, he transcends the physical, and the portal continues in the spiritual realm to where God is, however you want to say it. And in the spiritual realm, he's encountering yet additional cherubim, the original cherubim, guarding the way to the Garden of Eden, which is where the tree of life is, which is the tree of life is a metaphor for the profound spiritual experience. Through this, we can understand what would otherwise be a rather difficult episode in the Bible involving Samuel's first vision, the prophet Samuel. Looking at the scripture, it would appear that this vision came to Samuel without any preparation whatsoever, almost inadvertently. There is one clue, however, that is virtually ignored by all the commentators, and this is the verse, "The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel lay in the temple of God where the ark was." That's from the first book of Samuel. Okay, so Samuel has this vision. Apparently, the initial reading of the text is that it came to him without preparation, just spontaneously. But Rabbi Kaplan says, no, first of all, no, because he's laying before the ark of God. So that brings the question, what are we talking about here? How can he slept in the temple when you're not even allowed to sit in the temple? What is he doing? What does that mean? Okay, this is how he resolves this, and it's pretty clever. One major commentator resolves both these difficulties about the alleged spontaneity and the idea about laying down in front of the ark by saying this. The word shachav does have a common connotation of physical lying down or sleeping, but it also has the connotation of total relaxation of mind that comes through meditation. What this verse then indicates is that Samuel received his first prophetic vision after intense meditation on the ark, the place of the cherubim. So Rabbi Kaplan is using, first of all, his understanding of what it takes to get prophecy, plus his very varied understanding of the meaning of words, to say, Samuel in this prophecy was not spontaneous, and he wasn't lying down. His mind was at rest, just like your body's at rest if you're lying down. The same word can mean your mind being at rest. And how do you get your mind being at rest? Through meditation. So that's yet another textual example about how the cherubim were used as a meditative focal point, so people could meditate on the space between them and elevate themselves spiritually. Okay. Let me just see what else we have here. All right, we're going to continue the rest of this next week because it's pretty rich. Okay. All right, so just to summarize, so we started off talking about the rules of praying the Amidah, and we talked about standing and all that, and how that gets you neurologically ready to receive and to give a communication with God. And then we went right into the importance of Jerusalem and about how when we pray, when we face Jerusalem, we are actually in our mind supposed to be understanding that we are at the beginning of this portal that goes through Jerusalem and into the temple and into the Holy of Holies and through the space between the Cherubim to the spiritual realm, which has like a mirror image of it. And this is how we achieve spiritual contact with God and spiritual growth. Okay. And on that note, we will meditate. And again, the purpose of this is to get a taste of what meditation is, so that we have a running idea of what we're talking about. The purpose of this meditation is to develop the skill of controlling your mind. So you're going to sit up straight with a straight back, and that allows you to have a good flow from your pelvic area up your spine into your head, and it keeps your body comfortable. And you're going to pick a focal point. Many people pick the point at the tip of their nose when the breath comes in and out of their nostrils. And you're going to try to retain focus on that point. And obviously, you're going to keep missing it. You're going to get distracted. And the whole exercise is to develop this, strengthen your ability to keep focused on that point. So let's relax, sit up straight. Pick your focal point. Make a certain determination to keep that focal point in mind. And when you deviate, as you will, just keep returning to the focal point.